Hi, everybody. We are live from Simon & Schuster, by which I mean hello from our living rooms. We are here to chat with two very special guests who will be sharing some of their favorite recipes and tips for cooking and baking at home. I'm Heather, and I'm the editor of Tips on Life and Love here at Simon & Schuster. And we're very excited to be here with all of you. Before I introduce our guests, I actually want to give you a heads up that we're hosting a giveaway. So if you leave a question for us in the comments below, you'll be entered for a chance to win one of the 3 cookbooks that we're talking about today. You'll be entered for a chance to win them in ebook. So leave us a comment at any time during this live stream, and not only will we potentially answer your question, but you'll be entered for that sweepstakes. And now I am thrilled to introduce Erin Gardner. Erin is a baking and cake design instructor who's also the author of Procrasti-Baking, a delightful new cookbook that celebrates baking and procrastination, 2 topics I think we can all agree go together perfectly. Hi, Erin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a lot of fun to be here today.
Yeah, we're so excited. And we're also here with Carolyn Williams, who's a registered dietitian and culinary nutrition expert, whose book, Meals That Heal, focuses on the healing aspects of food with a quick, easy, and practical approach that I think we all need right about now. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, how are y'all?
And last but not least, we're joined by Laura Flavin, who's the Associate Director of Marketing for Tiller Books here at Simon & Schuster. Hey,
Yes.
Laura.
Hi.
And now I'm actually going to turn it over to you, Laura.
Okay, thanks. So I guess, guys, it's good to see you. Start out by just asking how you're holding up. It's kind of unique circumstances. Erin, you're in New Hampshire?
I am, yeah, no, I'm in Barrington, New Hampshire, just kind of north of the seacoast and south of the lakes region. Holding up good, holding up well. I've got 2 little ones at home, almost 5, and one that just turned 9. And my husband kind of half working from home, half having to go in sometimes. So, just juggling every day.
That's good. And Carolyn, you're in Alabama, right?
I am. I'm in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I am home with a 13-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old. So, the temperament around here changes hourly, but we just deal with it as it comes.
Oh, cool. So, okay, Heather and I are both in Brooklyn. So we are in our living rooms right now. And I personally just moved apartments, and I threw out everything in my old apartment kitchen-wise. So I'm starting from scratch. And then, pandemic. So I went out and did some shopping, but I'm still kind of trying to figure out what essentials I'm missing. And I'm definitely I forgot to get salt, which was a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually curious what you guys would say your 3 pantry essentials are right now. What are you so glad you have? And maybe if you're like me, what do you wish you had remembered to get?
Yeah. Well, I realized there's probably 3 pantry essentials that I use in pretty much every recipe, or savory at least. And that would probably be a good salt, like a kosher salt. And then an olive oil or an avocado oil, just a good basic oil to cook with, especially at higher heats. And probably garlic powder or a Greek seasoning. It's really pretty basic, but those usually go into everything that I cook. And garlic powder is an easy sub when you can't get to the grocery for regular garlic.
That's one of the things I don't have.
Oh.
Oh. Erin, do you have any essentials?
Yeah, with baking, it's tricky because, depending on the kind of baking that you love to do, your essentials are going to be a little different. Where I'm kind of primarily focused in the sweets world. Flour, I know it's tough right now. Some places it's easier to get than others, but that's really an essential. Salt, I've got to piggyback on that one. It's really hard to, bake a baked good salt free. So I feel for you. That salt, that's the painful one right there. And then a good vanilla. I think, if you have to make substitutions, like if you don't have eggs, you don't have flour, you don't have this, you don't have that. If you have a good vanilla, if you have a good flavor base, it makes it a lot easier to kind of tweak with the other things, gives you more flexibility.
That's a good point. I'm going to add that to my list because I also don't have vanilla. Garlic powder and vanilla, I'm adding to my list. I'm going to go hunt for them.
And salt.
Stock up after this. Yes,
My
salt.
neighbor gave me salt. They like took pity on me and they're like, you can't survive like this.
That's a tough one. Yeah, for sure.
Are you guys noticing any ingredients that are kind of hard to come by? Erin, you just mentioned flour, or maybe some ingredients that you overstocked, and just curious how you're handling adapting to that.
Yeah, the flour here is hard to get, so I guess that seems to be nationwide. Yeast is also hard to get, as well. You know, the stuff is pretty well stocked now. When we first started the quarantining and the staying at home, I loaded up. I was thinking, okay, I need shelf-stable stuff. So I got a lot of produce and I got a lot of frozen vegetables and that kind of thing. But then I also loaded up on all this like pasta and grains and all that kind of stuff. And I've got those coming out of my ears.
Yeah, we're also going to be eating pasta and chickpeas for a long time.
Yes, chickpeas or black beans. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, all good stuff, but yeah, it's like the go-to thing right now.
Yeah. I personally bought 3 giant bags of oatmeal. So I'm kind of like wishing I had gotten more pasta because I've been eating a lot of oatmeal, lots of it. So
you got to make some cookies or some granola bars.
They're the Irish oats. So okay. they're not as easy to make in cookies. So I would actually, I'm going to hit you up on trying to figure out what to do with it.
I've got a good granola recipe for you.
Oh,
you put them in.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Because I'm being a little sick of the standard oatmeal. So, well, we are a book publishing company, so I'm going to bring it back to the books. So, Carolyn, your book represents the savory side in this chat. What inspired your book, and what is one of the recipes that you love to share from it?
So Meals That Heal is my book that I did through Simon & Schuster. Quick and easy, anti-inflammatory. And it really was inspired by, I read an article several years ago on Alzheimer's and how food was related and what the research said. And inflammation was something that wasn't even on my radar, a term even of interest. And I discovered through writing that inflammation is really what pushes that disease forward and causes all the plaques to develop and the damage. And then I usually write about a variety of health issues. So I just started realizing after that, oh my gosh, every subject I'm writing about, whether it's heart disease or diabetes or obesity or autoimmune issues, inflammation is the underlying factor in all of those. So that was really kind of where I got my idea. But part of my challenge was, okay, so I know what to eat, but if I struggle doing that on a daily basis, because I don't have time and I have kids and I'm busy working and doing stuff, if I'm struggling, how do I make this concept of eating so super simple that people can actually do it? And so I really worked hard to just keep it simple. There's not expensive, health food store items in here. It's just basic stuff. I live in Alabama, so if you can get it at a grocery in Alabama, those are the ingredients in the book. So that was really where my inspiration for the book.
And do you have a recipe that you would recommend right now for people?
Oh, a recipe. The taco zoodle skillet, zucchini skillet is a favorite of everybody's.
That sounds good.
And then the chocolate chip peanut butter cookie dough bites. That you can use your chickpeas in that. But I promise you won't be able to tell it is chickpeas in there.
That sounds great. I have the zucchini skillet is on my radar for Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, good.
And Erin, okay, so you're the sweet side of this talk.
Yes.
What was your inspiration for the book? And then again, a favorite recipe to share.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my inspiration for the book is kind of spelled out in the beginning of the title, procrastinating. I have done a number of things in my baking and sweets career, and I started as a restaurant pastry chef and then owned a wedding cake bakery for a while, and then moved into the world of, teaching, writing tutorials, more along the decorative cake side of things. And so when I would go to sit down to write those tutorials or to create those concepts or recipes, sometimes I didn't really want to get started right away. So I would kind of warm up the engine with some easier recipes, some fun things, some things that you could play around with and share with friends and family, to kind of ramp up into the work I actually had to get done. And so that's kind of where this concept, that's where it was born. I posted a picture of what was it? It was a giant donut and some blueberry scones that I made when I was supposed to be writing for my last book. And I hashtag procrastinating. And then it kind of snowballed from there. I like to say I did not invent the concept of procrastinating, but I might have perfected it since I bake to avoid other baking.
I love it.
So I might be a good resource on that.
I think we all want some permission to procrastinate right now. So I really love it.
Yeah. No, I think now that everyone's on the work from home team, or a lot of people are on the work from home team, you might understand now why sometimes you just gotta push everything aside and get your hands dirty and make something delicious.
I love it. For both of you, okay, so I think you both have maybe had some time to look at each other's cookbooks. Are there any recipes from each other's books you're excited to try?
I cannot wait. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. Go ahead. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say.
I cannot wait to try the Salty Sailor blondies. It's like a blondie and then with caramel and then pretzels. I love any kind of caramel chocolate, that kind of thing. Actually, they all looked good. The frozen margarita bars.
That's a great one for right now. Nice little treat for mom, not for maybe not for everybody else.
Yeah.
But I was eyeballing your seared tofu with gingered vegetables. I love that you have a meatless chapter, because my husband and I, we're not solely a vegetarian, but we eat mostly plant-based. So this is fantastic to have a few more, things to throw in the mix.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Curious, do you guys have a favorite cookbook you always end up going back to?
Oh my gosh, so many. I would have to say my favorite baking book of all time is Pastries from La Brea Bakery by Nancy Silverton. I've used it forever, from the beginning of my baking career through today. She has the best go-to, wonderfully written recipes. And then on the savory side of things, I love to cook from Eat Real Food, what's the title off the top of my head? It's Cookie and Kate is the blog. Love Real Food. That's the book. Lots of great recipes in there.
Awesome.
Yeah. I love, honestly, a lot of the cookbooks that I go to are older ones and maybe more community-based, just because I feel like it's so easy. You can go online now to find a lot of stuff out there, but what I'm missing are kind of the ones, that your grandmother used to make, the real traditional ones. So I've got a collection over here of, winning seasons, a lot of these community-based ones from different junior leagues or churches or that kind of thing. And if I pull out a cookbook, a lot of times it's for, one of those.
I'm adding all these to my list. Heather, you can't escape the chat. I can see you there. And I think you had mentioned in a work call recently that you are kind of working your way through the joy of cooking. So I want to know about that and if you've learned anything so far.
Yeah, so I'm staying quiet because I am monitoring some great fan questions that we have coming in. So I will ask those soon. But yeah, so I'm actually not, I've only learned to cook comfortably in the last few years. So I'm still very, I still stick really close to recipes. So I was glad to get quarantined with some cookbooks. One cookbook that I've been using recently is I have the new Joy of Cooking edition. I have the ebook on my phone, And that's been really helpful. And so I actually made shepherd's pie this past weekend, which went really well. Yeah. And actually, sorry?
I said, that's ambitious.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I've been working my way up, guys. So some of the recipes that you're talking about, I'm kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to venture out a little bit further. So I'm excited. And two of the co-authors for the new edition of Joy actually have also been sharing some of their tips in quarantine. So we're going to share some of those down in the comments below, guys. In addition to the recipes that Erin and Carolyn have talked about, we will share those as we can down in the comments. So I'll turn it back to you, Laura. But yes, thank you. I am the audience right now because I'm listening to all of these helpful tips and recipes and thinking, what can I do next? So thank you guys so much.
I am also getting a lot from this.
Oh, good.
Okay, so wait, one more thing. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but everybody seems to be baking bread, especially sourdough. I cannot escape content about sourdough and people trying out baking sourdough bread for the first time. So I'm curious, do you all bake bread, and are there any common mistakes you've made or any tips you have for people who are just starting out?
This is probably a better question for Erin, but I will say one of the positives, I like cooking a lot better than baking normally, because I think I'm not like Heather. I'm not good at following a recipe because I'll start adding stuff or, let's try a little of this. And so baking usually, when I've got a busy, hectic schedule, doesn't always go so well, because you've got to be very precise and attention to detail. As I told my daughter, I was like, baking's like a science experiment. We can't, we've got to be exactly right with the measurements and do exactly what the recipe says. So one of the positives for me is with quarantine is I've really started baking more because I have the time and, I'm really enjoying it. I've baked some breads, but I haven't gone the sourdough route. I am feeling like I need to maybe venture out there, but I haven't done it yet.
Well, I was going to say, if you've never done it, I think it's amazing. I'll just backtrack. I think it's amazing that everyone's trying to make sourdough because that's a challenging thing to do. It's a challenging thing to jump right into. So my suggestion is if you've never baked bread before, and if this is a totally new concept for you, maybe sourdough is like project number 3 or 4, there's so many other breads that you can start with that are a little less, a little more foolproof. Like I have a focaccia recipe in my book where it's really just one rise. It's just a simple mix. There's no shaping. There's no, feeding a starter and inviting a new member to your family. It's truly just a recipe. It's not investing in like a, new way of living. You can try pretzels. Pretzels are another really easy, bready kind of thing, and it's fun. And again, it doesn't involve the whole starter situation. So I think that would be my best advice is to ramp your way up, is to feel comfortable with your hands and bread dough because it is different than baking sweets. You're looking to overdevelop gluten as opposed to, you don't really want to do that so much when you're making cakes or they get tough and dry. So yeah, I would, especially now, everyone under pressure, like I would not apply more pressure with a sourdough starter.
No.
I don't want to keep one more thing alive.
I have 2 kids that I have to worry about.
Yeah,
so I don't feel like
that's
another
enough.
thing to feed every day.
That is so true. That is a really great point. And thank you for that, for the baby steps for those of us that feel a little intimidated by that.
I'm letting you all off the hook.
Before we get to the next question, I just wanted to do another call out for the sweepstakes. If you guys leave us a question in the comments, you'll be entered for a chance to win all of the ebooks that we've talked about today. So please do.
Awesome. Okay, I have one more question just because Heather and I have maybe shown that maybe we're getting a lot personally out of this conversation. So do you have any advice for those people who don't normally cook much at home, aka me and Heather. Any other expert advice you can share, we would appreciate.
Just try it. You really can't mess a recipe up, especially when it's savory. Now, like with your sourdough, yes. And, your yeast spreads, yes, you can mess that up. But with your savory ones, especially more of your simple ones, you can't mess it up. You can typically, there's a lot of recipes out there and a lot that I put in my book where you can swap out the protein. So if it calls for shrimp, you can use chicken. And don't be afraid to swap out like vegetables if you don't have what it calls for. Just experiment. If you're following it, tentative kind of outline for a recipe, you're going to be okay for the most part.
Okay, that's
good. I think, just to piggyback on that, taste as you go. That's something that you learn as a restaurant cook. And I think it's just as important at home. Maybe not so much with baking. I mean, I still taste my cookie doughs and stuff, but especially when you're savory cooking, like just taste as you go. And if it doesn't taste salty enough or peppery enough for you, then make it taste the way you like it.
That's very helpful. I'm always worried I'm going to definitely screw something up when I'm just like not following the recipe exactly. I also with baking, tend to forget ingredients. So I sometimes have forgotten stuff.
The best thing that you can do with baking, if you're just starting out, is to always read the recipe from start to finish before you do anything.
That's
so. Read all the ingredients, read all the steps, because they're usually pretty short. It's not like a big time investment to do that. But then as you're going along, you've already read it, so it's already knocking around in there. So you'll know if you forget the salt or you forget something. It'll be top of mind.
Okay. Do you ever pre-measure out the ingredients and just have it?
Oh, for sure.
Have you?
I would love to say that I do that all the time and that's definitely a better way to go. But most of the time when I'm in the kitchen, I'm just scooping out of cans and jars, just like everybody else. But yeah, if you do have trouble, if you don't bake a ton and it's something that can be challenging for you, then taking the time to do your mise en place, to put out all of your ingredients in the measured amounts first, will definitely make it easier. And usually a quicker cleanup too, so you're not rifling around.
Okay, this is very helpful. Thank you. I'm gonna throw it back to Heather because she did mention audience questions.
Yes, we have some good ones. So this question is for both Erin and Carolyn. With so many homeschooling now, and I'm sorry, this question is from Sylvia. With so many homeschooling now, what recipes would you recommend for school-aged children to begin a cooking foundation? So maybe Carolyn, starting with you.
So this has really been a good time for me to realize, there's some key basics that I haven't taught my kids. One, for instance, we made whipped cream the other night. I realized my son had no idea where whipped cream came from. And I was like, it's one of his favorite things. And I said, it was something he could totally help with. He's 9. We've also done pizza dough. The yeast and the how it works. That was our science one day. We did pizza dough and they loved it. So, some of those just simple things, even things like scrambled eggs or grilled cheese sandwich, just, basic things that we tend to take for granted that are just good life skills to have.
I love that. My little sister has been taking culinary while she's at home with my stepmother. So I think all those recipes are handy. Erin, is there anything kind of baking wise that you think is a good foundation to start with?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the very first recipe I made was the chocolate chip cookies on the back of the Toll House bag. And I don't think that's a bad place to start. It's foolproof. It's all laid out there for you. And everyone loves chocolate chip cookies. So it's just, I think an ideal way to start with kids, and who doesn't, like to make cookies.
That's so true. That was probably my first recipe, by myself as a child too.
Yeah.
That's a great point. From Sima, we have a question. Ramadan just started today, so I'm looking for recipes that can help keep me full longer while intermittent fasting. Do you have any suggestions, Carolyn?
Yes. If you'll focus more on the protein and the fiber, also your last meal before you fast, try to get your carbs earlier in the day, and definitely don't eat any sweets in that last meal before you start your fast. That makes it much harder the next day with your just blood glucose levels, and giving you the feeling that you're hungry, even though you may not be. But when that blood sugar drops, kind of start to get a little hangry, and yeah.
I definitely get hangry. No, I do. I become a hangry monster, guys. So this is very helpful. Thank you. From Keely, they're asking, what age did you discover your love of cooking? Erin, do you remember how old you were when you made those cookies?
Oh my gosh. I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and just I never shook it. Been baking ever since.
Carolyn, how about you?
I think mine started when I was like 3 or 4, and I was running a restaurant with making mud pies in the backyard.
Yeah, that's true too.
I would take everybody's order while my parents were cooking out on the grill, and yeah, I had a whole restaurant.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. From Kate Davis, we have the question, what are some of the best canned goods to have on hand?
Ooh, diced tomatoes. Canned diced tomatoes, a good one of those, like a fire roasted or just a good quality diced tomato. I also always keep a good quality, just basic marinara on hand. I keep a couple of jars of that because there's so much you can do with it. And then black beans, chickpeas, and then a nut butter, like peanut butter or almond butter.
Definitely. And Erin, are there kind of any shelf stable things that you would recommend always having in your pantry?
Yeah, I mean, I think for quick sweets, a variety of cereals are great because you can always throw together, either a granola bar or a crispy treat kind of thing. And then, nut butters too. There's so much you can do with either peanut butter or almond butter. Even if you don't have flour, you can make a basic peanut butter cookie with just sugar, peanut butter, and an egg. It's kind of a magic recipe, you could say.
Yeah.
I shared a recipe yesterday that it used peanut butter. You can use peanut butter or almond butter totally in place of the butter, and it has no flour in it. It has some oats. But I made it, and my kids, it rivaled Toll House to them, which to me is a success.
Right.
Wow. No, that's amazing. I will say that the kitchen sink bars, Erin, that we have on a Tips on Life and Love excerpt, that's amazing. And we're putting that down in the comments. And Carolyn, we have your chicken fried quinoa recipe that we'll share as well. So I think both of those are kind of perfect, recipes to make at home too.
Oh, good. Yeah, quick and easy.
Sure. You can throw anything in those kitchen sink bars.
Exactly, which is perfect for me because I'm only going to the grocery every week or two. So that's great. We have another audience question from Vesna. What's your favorite crock pot recipe?
I'm not much of a crock pot recipe. I don't know why, but I feel like nothing I ever make turns out good in the crock pot. But I do love the Instapot. And I love the Instapot for more meal prep or just prepping of ingredients. For instance, I needed 3 cups of cooked chopped chicken breast, and all I had was frozen chicken breast in the freezer. I put those in the Instapot frozen, and 12 minutes later, you've got your cooked chicken. You do spaghetti squash in it, and so I use my Instapot a lot for those type of things. More, I guess, prepping ingredients, especially those things that take a while. So.
That's a great answer. And we have Milena here who's asking, what are good substitutions for basic pantry staples that run out fast?
Pantry staples.
Oats, since flour has been a hard thing to find. Now, this will not work in your more complex baking stuff. But I made a bread about 2 weeks ago that where I took my oats and I put them in the food processor and ground them. So I had like an oat flour. So that's something it was a quick bread. And it was a little denser, but it was a little heartier. So, but that was a substitute that I used when I didn't have flour.
Yeah, you can also get into some of your starches too, like depending on, it's so tough to give like a broad substitution because it really depends on each recipe. But like cornstarch or arrowroot starch, rice flour, those can all be good, flour substitutions depending on what you're working on.
Great.
Yeah.
And we are almost out of time, so we're going to take a couple more audience questions. We have one from Emily, and she says, have you created any new recipes while you've been social isolating? Have you been experimenting with anything?
Yes, probably the best thing for me is it's made me slow down a little. So I'm getting in the kitchen more, which I needed to do, and getting creative and experimenting, which is how you come up with new recipes, or how I do. So I've had a lot of fun with that. And one that I made the other night that was amazing, which that's big for me to say, because usually I don't like the stuff that I cook. I have to get taste testers to kind of critique it for me. I'm just around it too much. Was a spaghetti squash pad thai. And it was so easy, and it was phenomenal. And it used primarily pantry items for the most part.
Wow.
Yeah, really I'm jealous because I have been spending this time just hanging on to the classics, doing what I know, and lots of comfort food around here.
But you have the kiddos, Erin, so that's keeping you very busy, I'm sure. So the fact that like you have those kind of comfort staples, I think everyone, like the working parents like you guys, I think they can just really appreciate how you guys have these kind of recipes that are kind of the classics, the comfort, and can just be something easy for them to make.
Yeah. And Erin, my kids are so envious of your kids that they have a mom that created a dessert cookbook, a baking cookbook. Well, they're like, Mom, why can't you make that kind of book? Why does yours have to be healthy?
Well, I have to tell you, I have one, my littlest, who's going to be 5 on Monday, actually, Violet. She is my cookie monster. She's my fellow sugar freak. But my 9-year-old, he doesn't have a sweet tooth. I have to beg him to eat birthday cake or at people's birthday parties. Please take a bite. Because then the comment will always be like, oh, well, he has so much. I'm like, no, he doesn't eat anything. It's not me. It's him. He's the kind of kid who can see a big plate of cookies on the counter and he takes one and he's like, that was great. Okay, bye. That's it. I don't know where it came from. I mean, I know he's mine, but I don't know where that came from.
Well, and on the same front with kids, I've got a 9-year-old son who, some days I think he lives on air. Like, I don't know if he eats, but at the same time, he's also going through some growth spurts. So it has been really interesting during these 4 or 5 weeks that we've been at home because I can't really gauge groceries right. I always seem to stock up more. And he's like on the stage where he's not really, where he's, out the door playing in the yard. I'll eat something later, Mom. And then there's some weeks where I'm like, gosh, I can't keep up with what you are eating.
Or something that was a favorite last week is now like, oh, no, that's so great. I know, no, I don't want that. Oh, good. I'm glad we have 20 of them. Yeah, great.
As soon as you stock up, they don't like it anymore.
No.
Well, and speaking of stocked up, when you are really stocked up, but let's say you're one person like I am, do you have any tricks for kind of normal size recipes, kind of making them, like cutting them in half or smaller portions so that, let's say I'm baking and I, shouldn't be eating all of these cupcakes by myself, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, for baking specifically, I've got a couple really great tips for cutting things down. If you see a recipe that is like a sheet cake style recipe that's made or developed to be made in a 9x13 pan, if you typically divide that recipe into a third, you can bake it in a loaf pan, which will give you, far fewer servings.
Love that.
I
never knew that.
It's typical. I say that again, it's tough to give a broad tip, for every single recipe out there, but typically that works. And if you have to divide an egg, if that recipe requires that, you just whisk the egg like you were going to scramble it, and then portion from there if you need half of that egg or a third of that egg. And then you can just save the rest to throw in a scramble the next morning or something.
I never thought of that. That's so sad. But
I have never heard the third. You can, pare it down to a third for.
Yeah.
I love that. I can make all your brownies now.
Blondies, sheet cake recipes. They all kind of will condense that way typically.
Yeah.
That's
because a lot of times I don't want to bake because I don't want to have 4 dozen cookies sitting around.
Yeah, well, especially
36 brownies. Yeah,
that's one of the reasons I haven't been doing a ton of experimenting right now. Is my kids are strictly like chocolate and caramel folks, so I don't have the outlet to share if I want to try a new flavor. The other thing that I wanted to mention is if you make cookies, most cookie recipes like chocolate chip, white chocolate macadamia, whatever, if you scoop them onto a cookie sheet and pop that sheet in the fridge, freeze them all like that, and then just gather the scooped balls into a freezer bag, and then you can bake them off 1, 2, 3 at a time and not have to bake off like a huge recipe all at once.
Genius. Oh, you guys have been so helpful today. Thank you so much for joining us. That's pretty much all the time we have, but Carolyn and Erin, thank you so, so much for being here and for sharing these recipes and tips. We really appreciate it. Everyone, if you have not already, make sure to leave us a question or a comment down in the comments, and you'll be entered for a chance to win the 3 ebooks that we were talking about today. And make sure that you check out Meals That Heal, Procrastinating, and Joy of Cooking. We're going to share links to those books as well down in the description below. We have a page called Books for Cooks where you'll find all these books at the top featured. So make sure you check them out. And thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for having